my experience, just so that you know I'm legit. But also it's a case, I think it's really important to know what people's background are when they give you one of these talks, so you know where my perspective comes from. So as Lydia very kindly introduced me, I am a sport and exercise psychologist, and I work on a project within Sport Aberdeen that is linked with Glasgow Caledonian University on a program called Proactive Minds, which is all about supporting young people's mental health through sport and physical activity. Um, so everything I do in my role is really aimed at young people and supporting their mental health. Um, Today I was asked to talk about body positivity and self-esteem. And to begin with, I really wanted to start off by talking about what body image is, because I think it's a term that we all use, we all throw about, but for different people, it means different things. So when we're talking about it today, I just wanted to, I suppose, share my understanding of it and what context I'll be talking about it in. So for me, body image is that umbrella term about how people feel about their bodies. It's complex, and so it's often used in different ways, and that's not right or wrong. But I suppose depending on the context, it's just really important to understand what that meaning is. But for today, when I'm talking about body image, we're going to be talking about how satisfied people are with their bodies and appearance, and how we view others, how they value our appearance as well. So it's how we think about ourselves and how we view others, valuing how that look, what that look like means to us as well. Um, like I said, in different situations, this can be used slightly differently. And please, if you have different definitions, share it with me as well, because it's really good for me to understand how other people use the term. I suppose I'll start as well with the topic of the talk. So I will be talking about body positivity with you guys today, because everyone deserves to feel happy and comfortable in our own skin, regardless of their weight, shape, size, or skin type. We're all very much individual people, and we should feel that we get to be our unique and great selves without having to explain that. Um, so that's what I'm trying to get across today, is how important it is to be ourselves and to be um, ourselves, and to be the best version of ourselves as well. But when I am talking about body positivity today, I am going to be talking about maybe some more of the negative body image concepts, like body dissatisfaction, which I'll get onto in a bit. Just because I think if we're trying to be positive about our bodies, it's great to talk about them very highly and, you know, give ourselves all these good comments. But for me, body positivity is more than just those positive compliments. It's actually how we think about what we do and what we say that impacts us both positively and negatively, so we can have the best outcome, and I suppose create the best environment we can for not just our young people, but for each other as well. Because body positivity, body image, it doesn't stop when you finish your teenage years. It goes on with us for life. So we all have our different experiences. And it's really important that we draw on that and remember that as well, because these can be tough conversations for everyone to have. And then just, I suppose, in terms of self-esteem, I wanted to talk a bit about this meaning, and I suppose this diagram of how self-esteem tends to work. So it's an individual's assessment of their own worth and reflects their perceived abilities and competencies. So we all have thoughts, and these thoughts impact our behaviour, so what we do every day. And then from this behaviour and from these thoughts, we have feedback from the environment, so from the people around us, from what we see, what we perceive. Sometimes it's verbal, sometimes it's cues that we're picking up, sometimes it's subjective, sometimes it's objective, but it's everything the environment's telling us about what we're doing and thinking. And that can have an impact on our belief and our worth about ourselves. And then this follows a circle that it impacts our thoughts, our behaviours, and that how we're perceiving that environmental feedback as well. So to give a bit of an example, if you think I'm feeling good, you might say I do something, so I play sport because I know I can. Other people might be saying you're doing it well, therefore you feel valued. Now the opposite can happen as well. If we think, oh, I feel rubbish today, and you feel like you can't do something, you might as well also perceive that other people don't think you can do it well because you're not having those positive thoughts about yourself, and that can lead to value, or that you're not valued and that you're not worthy in that area, and then that can also lead to the cycle. So I suppose self-esteem can change. It can be positive and it can be negative, and I suppose what's really important to understand is it can change moment to moment, and it can change as well from the situations that we're in. So sometimes we feel really confident in one area in our life, like in school, but on other times, so like a social setting or at home or maybe in our work, we don't feel as confident. And that's okay. But if we can feel confident or good about ourselves in one area of life, we can hopefully feed that into other areas of our life as well. Now, I'm not going to talk about loads about self-esteem right now because I think a lot of people understand what that means and that assessment of we are seeing ourselves as being worthy. But what I will do is refer to it as we're talking about the different elements of body image as we go through the talk. So, like I said a few minutes ago, I think it's really important to not just focus on being solely positive and just giving people compliments. We need to understand about body dissatisfaction because that's essentially what a lot of people are struggling with at the moment, I think. And this term refers to people's negative attitudes towards their own body resulting from their perceived difference between how they actually look and how they ideally like to look. Um, Now, body dissatisfaction can also be looked at as body satisfaction if you want to take the opposite. So that would be that we have positive attitudes towards ourselves and our own bodies, um, and that our idea of how we'd like to look matches how we actually do look as well. And it's really important, I suppose, for us to be able to support and to promote positive body image, that we're also are promoting body satisfaction. So we're feeling comfortable in our skin, we're feeling comfortable with what we're doing and how we look. Um, it's really important that we consider body dissatisfaction because it can lead to immediate distress. It can lead to development of depression and low self-esteem, unsafe sexual behaviours, poor academic achievement, and unhealthy dieting as well. So it can be the start of challenges as well for not just young people but everyone. So it's just really important that we're always thinking about how people are satisfied with their body. Um, and I suppose for the rest of this talk, we're going to look at the psychological risk factors that we can do or can look at to prevent body dissatisfaction. Our role, I suppose, with supporting young people, be it parents, teachers, carers, that trusted adults, it's really important not just to focus on that positive talk, but actually really understand how we can demonstrate and talk about body image in that positive way for our young people so that they can learn that and then they're are reflecting that in their own actions as well and how they talk about themselves. So I'm going to jump back to high school geography, very basic stuff here. I'm not a huge geography fan, never really was in school, but just thought when I was thinking about this idea of body image, I wanted to represent it in a diagram somehow that was maybe away from how we typically tend to look at it. So there's different elements of on our parts pointed out on this diagram, and this is how a river is formed. So all the way from the source to the mouth. So the source, we're talking about where it all starts, where our journey with our body image starts, what really has that starting impact that allows the rest of the river to start running its course. We then have our contributors along the way. So this is different elements that contribute to how we look and see our body and how happy we are in our body. We also have our obstacles on the ground, so like personal experiences that the river has to meander around. And then at the end of the river, we have the mouth of the river and the body satisfaction levels. So I would say that if we have a nice clear mouth of the river, we're having good body satisfaction. And if it's a bit murky because of some of the negative contributors, it is more maybe dissatisfied with their body. But you're probably wondering, why is this woman talking to me about rivers when we're meant to be talking about body image and self-esteem and body positivity? Well, I suppose for me, it's really important um, to look at that diagram again of our thoughts, behaviors, environmental feedback, and belief of worth. Because when we don't feel satisfied or comfortable in our own skin, we can have all these negative thoughts, which then leads to those negative behaviors of the dieting, maybe the unsafe sexual experiences. It could be down to avoidance of social groups, acts like dyeing our hair or doing other maybe more long-term damaging things. And then once we do these things, we're getting feedback from the environment all the time, and that's tough to take. So sometimes it can be positive, which makes us feel a little bit better, but then we might get that positive feedback that we're looking for that's giving us a bit of worth, but our thoughts and behaviors are still negative. So it's not this very easy process, but it is a circle, and one thing can impact the next. So that's why when we're talking about like the source and contributors, we need to think all about how it's impacted our whole cycle and not just that one element. So for today, and sorry, I'm sniffling, I'm coming off the back of a cold. So if I do need to mute myself, that's probably why I need to either sneeze or cough. But for today, what we're going to look at is at the source of the river, we're going to look at appearance ideals and how that starts us off in our body image journey. We're then going to talk about fat talk and body comparison as our contributors to see whether that water stays nice and lovely and clear or goes a bit murky. And then we also have appearance teasing and judgments that can be life events that are causing those obstacles that shape a kind of a path of the river and down to the mouth to see if we are getting that body satisfaction levels that we're looking for or not. And what I would say is I don't believe in just talking about things. I think it's really important that if we're educating people on this type of topic, that we also talk about things that we can do to help. Now, there won't be like definites of if you do X, Y, and Z, this will fix the problem, because it's also really important to remember that all the young people and everyone we're working with are each an individual, so everyone's going to be slightly different. But we can take a similar approach to understanding and asking the right questions to help support them throughout. So I suppose to begin with, we should start at the source of our river, which is this appearance ideal of being perfect. And now I've used Barbie and Ken, which I don't know how many people watch the movie, but I think these can be like very stereotypical looks of the perfect idea of how we should look. But appearance ideals tend to be a certain image that we see in our head as that perfect look or the perfect way to be. But what I suppose logic tells us is there's no such thing as this perfect way to look, because actually myself and Lydia even will probably have different ideas of what that perfect look is, but it doesn't stop us having that idea of the perfect look in our head of what we're trying to achieve. There's pressures to meet these appearance ideals from all sources within society, and sometimes it can be even those close friends or family because of how we're talking about these appearance ideals. And having appearance ideals is fine, but I suppose challenges occur when the individual perceives their actual image to be different from from the appearance ideal, and are wanting to change that and maybe changing it in unrealistic, unachievable, or harmful ways. Pursuing these ideals can be very unhealthy and unhelpful for girls and boys, and for everyone, as the ideal look typically can't be reached, because it's like anything. When we see something that's perfect that we want to get to, when we get a little bit better and closer to that idea of perfect changes, so it's always that thing that we can never really reach. So I suppose our role within that as supporters of young people is being aware of that culture ideal, and being responsible as well for spreading it and being aware of how we're speaking about it. But then what can we do to help? And I suppose the first thing we have to remember with any of these things that we're talking about, body image, is we cannot play the blame game. So everyone's impacted by their environment. We all are, from how we grew up to day. It probably defines our music taste. It defines what sports we like. It probably defines even our interests and our hobbies. So it's not that one person is responsible for any challenges that someone is facing for their young people, but we can all have an impact on how we can help support them to overcome any challenges that they do face. But the big thing is not to blame any individual, because it's not any one individual's fault, including that young person, for having the challenges in the first place. And again, that's kind of going into that body positivity. We want to take that positive approach, that it's not just shaming people, it's okay that these things happen. We also want to educate young people on what appearance ideals are. From some of the work that we're doing in the Proactive Minds program around body images, we're understanding that we as adults are quite aware of appearance ideals. I mean, if you ask anyone, is social media real? They'd all probably tell you the same answer: no, it's made up, it's fake. There's this photo and that photo and all these lovely editing tools that make everyone look absolutely gorgeous. I think on the new Google phone, you can even wipe people out from the background, so it looks like you could be in a lovely, serene and tranquil place, even if you're crowded with people. But I suppose our young people, maybe they aren't aware of this because they might not understand it fully. So it's really important that we're educating and having the conversations with our young people, that what they're seeing out there on media, even in movies and the whole glamour of it all. It's lovely, and it's lovely to enter into that world for a little bit, but it's not reality, and that's not how anyone looks all the time. Um, and I suppose it's really important just to have those open conversations. But when we're having those open conversations, not to disregard if young people do have those appearance ideals, because they're still experiencing them. And that's important to not just swat them away, being like, oh, you know, you're just young. That's not real. It's fine, because that young person's experiencing it. So we need to acknowledge it, but also educate at the same time. And you're going to hear this next line so much from me over the next talk. But we also need to highlight the uniqueness of individuals. We're all born different shape sizes with different genetics. No two people are the same. And that means no one's ever going to look the same, no one's ever going to be the same, no matter how much you'd like to be. But it's also, I think, important in a world where we're always trying to follow a trend, be it on social media, be it fashion, be it styles, whatever. We are all individuals, and we all have our own uniqueness, and that's what makes us special in ourselves. And I think that's the narrative we need to be talking to young people about, not what's going on or trying to be and fit in with everyone else. It's actually what makes you you, and let's focus on that and really hype that up. And having open conversations with our young people as well. Like, I would be the first to admit, like, I have my own challenges with body image and having this ideal of how I'd love to look. Um, and that, to me, well, what I'm realizing in the last couple of weeks is it's not shameful. Everyone actually has it. If you ask anyone, they probably would share their story of what that is. But I think if we have these conversations openly with our young people, they can also learn from that as well, and see it's not just them, and that shared experience can really help them along the way too. So yeah, that's the whole idea of being perfect. And that's our source of the river. And I realized I have all these pictures, which I forgot to click the button for. Um, so the next point I really want to talk about is how we praise and value our young people, or how we praise and value anyone, because I suppose all of this isn't just relevant to the young people that we work with or care for. But if I was to ask you how you would compliment or praise someone, you probably give me examples of they look nice, or their hair looks good, or I like your shoes. Now, none of these compliments or praises are anyway bad or the wrong thing to do, because again, we're not playing that blame game. But I suppose that the big thing is we focus a lot on how we look, probably even without realizing we're doing it. So like, I know myself, like, I brush my hair every day, I put on a bit of makeup, I make sure that my hair is not greasy, because I'm valuing how I'm presenting myself to society. But I suppose when we're a bit younger, sometimes we misunderstand how much that look and appearance is worth. And sometimes it can be, I think, the narrative that we tell in society is that all we're valued on is how we're looking. And that's where the danger lies in. Um, this particularly comes across in media. And when I say media, I mean social media, I mean newspapers, magazines, movies, even the radio and advertisements we see. We're always looking at these images of how we should be, or this is what you should be looking for. Um, and this narrative that we hear all the time is you should fit into this certain bubble, a certain look, a certain shape, a certain size. And this is what I would say we call fat talk. So fat talk is a type of conversation that focuses on appearance and involves people pushing themselves down and criticizing what they look like. Then others putting themselves down too, and it going in a cycle. So I think mostly people think fat talk is like talking about that topic of being fat, but it's not. It's more of that, and again, add more of an umbrella term to talk about how we're shaming ourselves for not looking like that source, that appearance ideal. And again, with that not being true, we're always going to be left at a loss, because we can never really satisfy that. Fat talk can cause a lot of problems, including body dissatisfaction, and engaging in fat talk can also strengthen the importance of body image on self-worth and identity. And again, like we're saying, we're not saying that specifically talking about how we're looking is a bad thing, but it's really, really important that we're not just focusing all someone's worth and all the compliments we're giving someone is on how they look alone. And I'm going to go back to my river analogy, and this is one of the contributors because, again, we have that source at the top that's talking about that ideal image that is kind of where we all start. But then this fat talk can feed into it because it's almost keeping that narrative alive. Now, what can we do? We need to focus on feeling good. So praising other elements of young people rather than just how they look, because that's really important. We're not just focused on our appearance. It could be someone's kindness, it can be their personality, it could be their approach to life, or just their consistent energy that they're bringing into a room. And it's not saying that we can't praise their looks too, but it's just, I suppose, as well, being aware of, for my young person, is all I do is talk about their looks, or is there other things I'm also talking about all the time, and do they know that that's what makes them brilliant? Focus on them feeling good within themselves. So if someone is feeling good or not feeling good, ask them why. So if someone's not feeling good about how they're looking, have a conversation, try to figure out why they're not happy with it, because I think sometimes we are answering these definite questions of yes and no. So someone says, "Do I look fat?" And all of a sudden, it's either you say yes and they feel rubbish, or you say no and they should feel so much better. But actually, a more powerful question we can ask is, "Why do you think? Why are you asking that question?" Or why do you Do you think you're fat? Like, and I'm using this as a very general term because there's a lot going on for different people. But if we ask young people or ask anyone the why, there's probably a lot more to it that's going on behind that one comment. And if we're having these open conversations, we can understand more and understand to know how to help better. Because in these situations, our young people are the expert on themselves and they know what's best for them. And I think our role is more to support them on how we can get them to feel better at their own time and pace as well. Um, I suppose what we don't really want to do is to increase the attention to body size or appearance. So we don't want to be leading with that of focusing on those elements. We need to treat the individual as a valuable person and not just how they look. So they're not just a model. It's not just about the clothes they wear or how they're showing everyone how they look. It's about more than that. Um, you can also show that you care that what might be bothering them. So again, those open conversations. And I suppose we don't want to shy away from calling out fat talk as well. So if you hear people are doing it or saying it, so whether that be siblings that you have in your house or young people that you hear in the schoolyard or that you mind or you look after, when people are falling into this, I suppose, category of talking about themselves or talking about other people negative, saying like that's not nice and that's not good, because we create the culture that we live in. So it's only by our actions can we change it again. Alternatively, we can also divert conversation from talking about how we look and focus the conversation on something else. So choose not to talk about the sizes, choose not to talk about the clothes, choose to talk about something else. We can ignore the fat talk that's been spoken about without ignoring the person. So it's not that we're just disregarding comments, but maybe pick up something else in the conversation that you can go with. Um, we can treat each individual as that valuable person, picking out their great qualities and what makes them them. But also, we also need to remember as well within all this that we are also able to talk about ourselves positively. And if people are talking about themselves in a nice light and saying, "I look fantastic today," praise them for saying that, because that's a huge thing. Like, I think sometimes when people are struggling, particularly with talking about themselves in a positive way, when we hear someone talking or when they are struggling to about how they're looking in a negative way, when we hear people talking positive about themselves, there's that idea of jumping to, oh, they're too confident or they're cocky and they're all about themselves. But actually, if we were nicer to ourselves and all talked about ourselves a bit more positively, people might start feeling a bit better. And it might become the culture of actually we compliment each other rather than tearing each other down. So yeah. And then I suppose the next element is the comparison trap. And this is another contributor of what can help our waters become murky or stay clear. So the comparison trap is another well, obviously a trap that we can fall into, and it happens when we look at other people and compare ourselves to them. So this can be either good or bad, and actually it's a lot of the time when we're struggling with our confidence, this is where it comes from. So we see similar who we think is similar to ourselves. And sometimes to feel more comfortable and confident in ourselves, we need to compare ourselves to be better, or sometimes when we're feeling less comfortable and confident, we might compare ourselves to be even worse. Um, but a lot of the time in the body image area, the comparison trap is focused on picking things out about ourselves that we don't like. Um, and unfortunately, this normally doesn't lead to any positive outcomes, and they can be quite harmful to how we value ourselves, um, and I suppose how we see ourselves as well. Um, and just on that, I suppose the harm in it happening once or twice is probably minimal. But like everything else, we seem to get stuck in these circles of once we go down it, it's really hard to come back out of it. So if we can avoid falling into this trap, chances are we're going to be a lot more satisfied with our body. But then what can we do to help this? And I think this is, again, probably sounds really airy fairy when I say these things, but I suppose there's no right or wrong in all this. It's about understanding how what we're doing impacts our young people, to understand what the best approach is. But with comparison traps particularly, it's really important to understand that comparison traps come from insecurities. So we don't normally compare ourselves unless we're unsure. So if you feel someone is comparing themselves to other people, maybe having that conversation and opening up that um those thoughts about what's going on here. We also want to look at why do we feel like we need to compare these certain elements, because it could be if it's something happening in school, and this can be someone who's really confident in themselves is starting to compare other people because that's what everyone else is doing in the class, and being aware of why they're doing it, we can then maybe see that there's something else happening that maybe we can support at a wider level. We want to emphasize everyone's individuality, because everyone is individual and everyone's going to be different. They're going to be different body sizes, they're going to be different body shapes. And even if we have two people, even in an exercise setting, who are doing the same program for the same amount of time, are going to look different after 6 weeks of doing exercise and dieting because of their genetic makeup. And that isn't something to be ashamed of or compare, but actually it's all about you. And we need to work on how do we get people to be the best version of themselves, because only you can be the best version of you. There's no one who can be a better Ciara than I can be, and there's no one who can be a better Lydia than Lydia can be, because no one else is Lydia. And that's really, really important to emphasize to our young people as well. And I suppose with that, what would be really good use of time and energy is exploring how people can be the best version of themselves. What makes it important for someone to be the best Lydia, the best Ciara, the best Sophie, the best Ewan, whoever they are, how do they be the best version of themselves? And we can help explore that by asking them the questions and having these conversations rather than yes, no answers or quick fixes. One of the examples I always really like to give is in sport. Um, we often have a lot of players who play the same positions. So these two guys, I don't know if anyone's an NFL fan. This is Peyton Manning in the orange and Russell Wilson, I think, and the shorter guy. And they're both quarterbacks in the NFL, and both are absolute superstars in their own right. They're fantastic at what they do, and in for different reasons could be nominated for the Hall of Fame. But they are completely different shape, size, skin color, everything. But it doesn't mean that either of them don't bring different qualities to make them fantastic in the roles they work. And this is what we're trying to show our young people is they can bring themselves into a situation to be the best version of themselves, to do the best job they can. And these are actually examples that we can use. So if you know your young person likes football or art or music, we can use different comparisons that we see in social settings that can show and demonstrate to our young people actually they don't need to be the same as someone else. They can be their best selves in their own right as well. And if anyone needs any other sporting ideas, come to me. Football's not my strong suit, but for a lot of other sports, I have a lot of other examples that I can give you guys as well. But I won't bore you all tonight. And then I suppose the last thing I'm really going to talk about today is that appearance seizing prejudice, which I feel like I don't need to tell anyone what appearance seizing is. We all know, we've probably all had it happen to us in our lives. And for me, this is an experience that we go through in our life. And that shapes that course of the river. And can make that river longer and potentially pick up more dirt along the way or clearer. And it's not nice. because it's people picking on us for how we look, what we're doing, what we're wearing. And it can range from just simple name calling or writing notes or making comments behind people's back to hostile remarks on individual appearances. And we also have prejudice as well by judging people by how they look before we even get to know them as well. I wanted to give some examples of particularly of appearance teasing within that self-esteem cycle to show you how it can have an impact on young people, because I think it's really important, I suppose, to bring in that element of self-esteem, and I suppose recap on why we're saying it's so important to think about all these things, all the parts of the river, because if we don't, it's going to have that impact on the thoughts and our values about ourselves. Now, I have two different examples from young people and just things I've heard in schools. And the first one is one girl, there are two girls in a classroom, and one turned around to the next and said, "Your hair looks stupid." Now, I haven't spoken to the individuals, but I can imagine these are some of the things that might be happening, and from the reactions, some things that might be going on within their head. So immediately that young person may have thought, "I look stupid because someone has told me I look stupid." Their behavior might be to change their appearance. It could be that they don't wear their hair like that, and that could be their favorite hairstyle. It could be that they take down their hair straight away. But they've changed what they're doing and being them because of something that was said, because a thought was put in their head because of, again, that feedback. People then might say, after they've changed their appearance from the initial hairstyle, "Why are you doing that? You're changing," and making all these other judgments on them because of that action, and leading to that individual feeling that they're not good enough because they're getting questioned all the time, and that look that they wanted and that they felt comfortable in isn't good enough. It's probably not in that idea of perfect. And do you know what? It could have been there in their bubble of perfect and how they wanted to present themselves, but because it didn't fit into that social element, that social idea, it wasn't good enough and everything changed. So we might have had a girl who went very comfortable in class and very happy to all of a sudden very not. The second example I have is when two boys are getting changed in a classroom for PE, and one boy said to the other, "You have man boobs." Very, very harsh comment. And might have been thinking to himself, and again, I will say I haven't spoken to them, so I'm just elaborating on what I think may have been going on inside their head. But they could be thinking, "I am fat because that's what someone said to me." Their behaviors that might have changed in this situation are they avoid changing in front of others. So again, they're avoiding people, they're taking that step back, they don't want to be out, they're not feeling comfortable. Environmental feedback from that situation might be, "He's weird that he doesn't change in front of everyone else. What's going on with him? Does he have something to be ashamed of?" And that backs into that cycle of, "I'm not good enough," again, of I'm getting questioned for being me, I'm obviously not good enough, and so on. And what's really sad about these cycles is unless something's done about it, these cycles continue because they're like a downward spiral. And it's us and it's that change in the environment. It could be someone stepping in to say something along the lines of, praising his value and worth. It could be someone making a positive comment about how he's looking, or it might be questions asking him to feel like how he's feeling about himself. That's changing that thought process. That can change the behavior, change the environmental feedback or how he's perceiving the environmental feedback, and essentially changing that value and worth they have on themselves. So questions to ask ourselves, I suppose, are how do I speak about others? Because I suppose that's the thing, even us as adults, and I might be presumptuous, but I presume it's all adults on the call today, how we speak about ourselves, how we speak about everyone else, our little ones, they have ears that could listen for miles. I think I have a niece and nephew and they pick up on everything. And although we might even be talking as two adults, depending on what we're saying about ourselves, they're seen as the norm or they're seen as regular behavior, especially at those key developmental stage. So we need to be careful about how we speak about others. We need to look at ourselves and think, do we rate their looks or other aspects. So when we're judging people, when we're talking about people, what are we talking about? Because again, this has an impact of what our young people feel like is normal and what's going on. We need to have a look at um, what way do we speak about ourselves? Because if we're negative about ourselves, our young people are also going to pick that up. So we need to be aware of that. What language are we using? Are we using words like fat? Are we using words like slim? Are we using happy and feeling not so good in ourselves? When we're talking about our diet, are we talking about like fueling our body of energy? Or are we saying about having a bad day because we've had a bit of chocolate? All these things that have an impact. So that's where that body positivity comes in. If we can use that positive language, it can be a lot more impactful to the young people, and we can set a good role model. And do we call out the body judgmental comments? So when we hear people talking and we hear people either judging themselves or judging other people, do we enter into those conversations, or do we say, no, actually, that's not right? Because again, these are the examples we can set for our young people, both in the wider in the environment, in our own homes, in supporter roles, and so on. So the take-home messages I have today are just to think about what we're saying and thinking about the actions that we're doing, because they're going to have the biggest impact on young people's body images. And what I would say is the information I've given you today is just that starting point. If you'd like to know more, this website that the QR code's on, and I can send the slides around to Lydia to share with everyone after as well, is the Young Minds website. And they have, what's great about their website is they have different elements of support for parents, professionals, and for young people themselves. So it doesn't have to be you trying to figure out the solution to the challenge by yourself. It can be conversations and resources for everyone. So yeah, I'm not entirely sure how I'm doing for time, but that's kind of what I had to talk about today. And I'm happy to answer any questions if they've come up, or anything else. If people even want to have a discussion, happy to do that. But what I'm going to do is stop sharing my screen, because at the moment I can just see Lydia in a little box in the corner. So in case anyone else pops there,